Hey, welcome back to my garage. So today we are tackling the front wheel seal on a John Deere 4410. So this is a four-wheel drive tractor, and I messed up the seals in the front end, and so all the gear oil is leaking out of my four-wheel drive axle. So this would apply to the 4410, of course, because all of those are four-wheel drive. It also applies to the 4310 and the 4210 where equipped with the four-wheel drive option. So we'll get into this real quick, and it's not real hard. You're gonna need a puller with a slide hammer, and you're gonna need a press. Now, you don't need a great big press. As long as it's big enough to get the diameter in there. The bearings have an interference fit, but it's not a real tight interference fit, but it's more than what you want to put together with with a hammer and a sleeve. So without any further ado, let's get into this. So this is why we're doing this. I was working in some mud, and it was pretty soupy, and I was in, like, I mean, the front wheels were in up to here. This was completely in liquid muck, and whenever I came out, I hosed the tractor down, but I didn't get in behind the wheels and make sure that this was all cleaned up. And then the next day, whenever I went out and went back to work on it, then both seals, so the seal on this side and on the other side, within a few hours, both of them started leaking. So the first one just started weeping a little bit, but when that second one let go, man, it just dumped everything, and so I had to stop. So what happened was this mud, when the mud was all liquidy, it wasn't so much a problem. But then I let it sit overnight. This mud dried up, and then as the hub rotated with the wheel, then it ground up that mud and actually kind of pushed it down into the seal and opened up the lip on the seal. So if you're in this same situation, well, first of all, don't get in this situation. Make sure you clean behind the wheel. Obviously, if you get into the muck. But if you find yourself in this situation later on, then whenever I'm putting this back together, I'm actually going to put it together wide track up front, so it's going to roll the front wheels out and make that more accessible for me to clean it better in the future. Okay, so first step, I'm going to clean all this mud off. Get that cleaned off, get that out of the way, so that I don't make this any worse than it is, and then we'll get into this. Okay, so that's got that pretty well cleaned up. Now, down here, there is a recess for the gear puller, and mine, of course, is packed full of mud, but there's one on either side, directly across, of course, from each other, and that's where we're going to put the jaws in for the gear puller. Unfortunately, they didn't build this with jacking bolts. That would have sure been nice if they'd have just tapped a couple locations so we could run jacking bolts in here and pull this off, but they didn't do that. So we're going to remove these 8 cap screws. There's 8 of them. They're 10 millimeter. They're torqued to about 30 foot-pounds. So we're going to remove those, and then this whole hub assembly right here, it's going to split right here where my thumbnail is. It's going to split, and all this is going to come out. So this will come with the seal immediately behind it, the bearing in there, a spacer, then the gear, and then there's another bearing on the other side of that, and then a snap ring. Okay, when this separates, it's a pretty tight fit, and you're not going to pull it out by hand. You're not going to beat it out. These slots here are too wide for prying. Do not pry. I guarantee you'll tear something up if you start trying to pry on this, with a lever. This is meant to pull straight out as one assembly. Otherwise, you'll mess up. You'll mess up something. And so I'm gonna clean this mess up. That way, just in case, whenever it comes out, it drops free. I don't want it to hit the concrete. I'm not so concerned about tearing this up as I am chipping my concrete, because this is, kind of heavy. So anyway, get this cleaned up and I'll be right back. Okay, I got my mud cleaned up down below. That way, if this assembly does end up landing in it, I don't end up getting mud in my bearings, of course. So this set of jaws, obviously this isn't a store-bought assembly. This set of jaws is a big set that I had from another puller, and the end was actually too big to fit in the hole, so I dimensioned the hole, and then used my 4.5-inch grinder with a cutoff wheel and a brace of blade, and cut the end down so that it was just the right size to drop in on both sides. And then my slide hammer didn't have a frame that was wide enough to spread this distance, so the part that is supposed to be, that my jaws would supposed to be going in, is actually bolted here in the center and between two pieces of plate that extends my jaws out where I want them to be. So this is my my kind of hillbilly approach here to get this thing apart. And then I've got some baling wire here just to keep the jaws from snapping open whenever I start slamming on it. So bear with me. And there it is. So now this is the lip that was actually inserted inside the housing. So that's what we had to pull free. There is a sealer on here that I'll have to scrape off. It's just like a Forma gasket type sealer. I'll put a link below in the product that John Deere recommended. And now next we need to get rid of this snap ring. This snap ring comes off first, and then that's our next step to get this apart. This is a pretty hefty snap ring, so you're going to need a respectable snap ring pliers, obviously. When I'm pulling a snap ring off, especially a big one, I just put something in between, in the center of it. That way, as I'm coming up, if I lose this thing and it snaps and goes zinging, then it'll hit my screwdriver in this case and at least slow it down, dissipate some of the energy, and I got a better chance of finding it. We all know it's kind of hard to find those things when they end up underneath a toolbox somewhere. Okay, so next step, we are going to take this over to the press and apply force here, support it out here on this the outer edge, and then apply force here. There's a bearing visible here, and there's another bearing that's inside the housing, and the bearings on the outer race, it's just a slip fit, but on the inner race it's an interference fit. Like I said earlier, it's not real tight, but more so than what you want to just do with, you know, beating on it with a hammer. I mean, you could put a ball peen hammer here, up inverted, ball down, and hold the hammer, and then hit that hammer with a small sledge, a mini sledge, and accomplish the same thing as we're going to on the press, but it's not as clean. So getting it apart is doable that way, but putting it back together, not so much. When we put it back together, we need to have this squared up whenever we press the bearings back on. So anyway, enough of me rambling. Let's head over to the press. Okay, we're set up here. We're supported on this lip. Like I said earlier, there's not going to be a lot of force required to get this to break loose. But anyway, so we're supported on these lips on either side, and then applying force right there on the center of that shaft. And if you haven't yet, I really recommend you put a pneumatic ram on, or pneumatic hydraulic pump on your press. It really, really makes life easy. Okay, we'll get the bearing, move it over here to a clean area out of the way. And then next, the gear comes off, and if you're looking at the exploded view, there's a spacer right here. Oops, sorry, there's the spacer. That spacer goes on right there, so we don't want to mess up and forget that whenever we're putting this thing back together. And now we're down to this part. And there's the seal. So, well, that side's all dirty, so I don't really care about that. So now you can see that's more mud that I have to clean off before I put this back together. But I'm done with this for right now. I'll get this out of the way. And now I want to get that bearing out of there, because like I said earlier, this is just it's a slip fit. So whenever we start messing around with this thing, it's going to fall out anyway. So I'd rather take it out under control. There it is. So there's that bearing. It's got a little bit of, there was a little bit of muck in my gear case. Now we're down to just the seal. And the seal, this is a straight cut seal. It's a two-piece straight cut seal. I'll get the new one. So the seal itself is resting inside this metal ring. The metal ring is what we'll put sealer on and press it into the casing. And when we do, the metal ring is actually supposed to set 60 thousandths of an inch above the face right here. So I'm going to clean this muck off, and then we'll knock that seal out and move on to the next step. So you can see there, the old one is actually, the old one's made just a little bit different than the new one, or I guess to say that correctly, the new one's made just a little bit different than the old one. The old one has this lip that protrudes out, but the metal ring is actually flush. But the instructions that came with this actually said to set the ring that I showed you 60 thousandths above this surface right here. So these seals, made by Spicer, part number S20HH126, they're about $70 a piece, and I couldn't find them for less money anywhere. You can go to John Deere, get them for about $70 a piece, and pay shipping, or at least I would have had to, because they don't keep them in stock. They also carry them on Amazon if they have enough in stock for your particular application. I found them a third-party place. The seal was listed for less money, but then whenever they added shipping to it, it was still $70 a piece. So, all right, we're going to knock that seal out and move on to the next bit. No, I don't have a seal driver that size. My seal driver set stops just a little bit short of this size. So anyway, no matter. So when the new seal goes in, there's a spring inside of it. I'm not ready to put it in, but I'm going to show you while I'm thinking about it. So on one side, it's flat and smooth-ish. And on the other side, if you look, you can see a spring. I don't know if that shows up on the camera or not, but there's a tiny spring in there. This is the cup side. The cup side faces the oil. The cup side always faces the oil. So any pressure inside the case actually causes, the seal to seal against the rotating assembly. So it's going to go in like that with the smooth side outward. So now I'll take a minute, get this cleaned up, get it ready to reinstall the seal, or install the new seal, and I'll be back with you. Okay, we're ready to start putting this back together. The first step will be to put the bearing back in this housing. Now, we want to be careful because remember we set this where it's 60 thousandths of an inch raised. So whenever we start putting weight on it, if we bang around on this, then obviously we could end up driving that in further. Again, I don't know why John Deere says that there needs to be 60K, but I'm not going to mess around with it. So that bearing, you should be able to just line it up and get it in there. There we go. Like I said, it's a slip fit, so it just drops right in. Now, that bearing onto here is not a slip fit. We're going to have to press that. So it doesn't slide down on there. So anyway, we'll start getting things put together and then head on over to the press. So we start out. I've set the axle stub down here, and it's centered underneath the ram. And next, we pick up the bearing housing, and that still has that bearing in it that I placed in it earlier. Set that down over it. Of course, it's not going to go very far because it has to be pressed into place. Next, that spacer that we talked about earlier. And then the gear, we'll flip it over. The splines will engage with the hub, the axle shaft, and then that spacer will slide actually over the outside of this. There we go. The splines are engaged, and the last piece is my final bearing. And of course that won't go on because that's an interference fit. Yes, that's a piece of pipe. Happens to be just the right size. I've used it a bunch of times for this. Bearings in this, bearings in the rear end in my Jeep. Alright, I know. This is starting to look pretty hillbilly, but it works. And we're there. Yep, there is just the proper clearance for my snap ring to go back in. We'll take it back over to the table and put that snap ring in, and then we're ready to put this thing back together. Okay, this time, that's a magnet. Whenever you don't have enough hands, it's pretty handy to just use a magnet for that. That way, in case that snap ring gets away, like I said, it dissipates the energy, and I can find the snap ring. There we go. My pins were through far enough that I couldn't get the snap ring all the way down. Okay, she's about ready to go back together. Do a final wipe around here and put some of that sealer on there, and then I'm ready to reinstall this. So this is the oil that it takes in the front differential on camera. Yeah. Low viscosity high guard transmission and hydraulic oil. No, it doesn't take 90 weight gear oil. This is what John Deere says that it's supposed to take, and it takes 1 gallon and 1 quart. So this is the same stuff. If you got a hydrostat drive, this is the same stuff you use in a hydrostat. So just pick up 2 gallons of it. That way, you've got a little extra whenever you do need to put some in the hydrostat. If you take hydraulic implements on and off of the tractor, then you lose a little bit every time you do it. So it's always nice to have a little bit of that around. So we'll get our sealer put on there, and then get this thing put back together. So if you didn't notice, I did not match mark this whenever I took it apart, because this doesn't matter. The holes are all equidistant apart. It doesn't matter where your pull points are. So however I get this to line back up with my 8 bolt holes, that's all that matters for this. Obviously, I have to engage this gear with the gear in the in the front axle, the drive gear for it. I guess you'd call it a pinion.